Yo, hey guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Pascal Floor. Yeah, and who's that other guy again? I think it's the Hall, Steve Hall, from London.
Steve Hall over here.
How are you doing, Steve?
I am all good. Well, in many ways, I got a full belly, which is nice. There's a change since the last month. Haven't really had a full belly apart from full of vegetables or something. And my back is pretty much up from like head to toe, pretty much wrecked, which is it's quite delightful actually.
And what did you do? Did you actually, I don't know, carry some cows or something like that?
I actually went for a Asian needle massage where they stand on your back with shoes that are like football boots but with little needles.
Yeah,
you can actually imagine reasonable. That. It sounds legit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, everything coming from Asia, it isn't a surprise. I mean, I've been to Tokyo once, right? And it was a completely different world. I mean, there were things I never even imagined that it's really in the real world. Maybe
like
something
Futurama.
like, yeah, I don't know, something like, I can't come up with an example, but there are so many absurd things going on there, and it just with so many things, it's just like as if it's from a movie or someone made it up, but it's actually real life. You're just walking around there, and you're just wondering, am I on the rocks or am I totally wasted, or what is going on here? But it was actually quite cool. But yeah, just wanted to say that many things coming from Asia, without sounding racist at all, are quite interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it's Singapore and Tokyo where I've seen people talk about how like everything in the cities is thought out. Every little detail is like they know it's got a purpose. Like every brick.
I mean, if you take a look at Singapore, I've never been to Singapore, unfortunately, but if you take a look at the architecture there and also the laws and rules, just things like pollution and stuff like
chewing
that.
Gum? No chewing gum?
Yeah, they're really strict with things like these. And also when it comes to drugs and stuff, actually doing drugs there is a really true fallacy. And yeah, you are being charged with quite severe,
consequences.
Consequences. Yeah.
I'd love to go to Tokyo's for sure on my list. I'd love to go to Singapore and just travel a bit more. But regardless, that isn't why my back is pretty much screwed. I have reintroduced the deadlift into my program, and having only done 2 sets, I probably could have done 1 set and still been pretty beat up. But I sometimes, especially for a lift like a deadlift, I'd struggle doing 1 set and feel satisfied. I don't know. I'd feel a bit odd. I've only ever done like 1 set on lunges because those also wreck me completely if I do reintroduce lunges for a long time. So yeah, haven't deadlifted for within consistently in my program for over a year. The last time I was doing it was, I think, during my maintenance period, splitting up my contest prep a bit last year. So went in with a conservative kind of numbers, but it felt really good, felt very smooth, felt pretty easy. Looking back at the footage, it looked like, 4 reps from reserve. It felt pretty hard though at the time.
So with 180 kilograms.
180 kilos. I'm a good deadlifter.
Yeah, your glutes are simply too massive. I mean, I took a look at the videos also from your from the one day where you've been squatting or doing some good mornings, I think, and you only wore like pretty tight tights, and the glutes were just sticking out. You looked like a Brazilian model.
I've decided as well. I had a consultation with Mike, and I just kind of decided to not hold back my strong points at this stage of my career particularly, and just fucking grow them as best I can. So if I can have freakishly large glutes and arms, I'm going to do it. So I decided not to hold myself back in that regard and just like get back into some lifts and start progressing with some movements that maybe I'd held back a little bit in the past. Maybe needlessly, I don't know. But yeah, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, it's a bit of a thought experiment in many ways, putting the deadlift back in, because I know like, for example, my back feels like it's been absolutely destroyed and places are aching that haven't ached for a long time. And I mean, that's always going to happen when you introduce something novel and new. But I have had some of the best back progress ever in this off season without having the deadlift in there. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see what happens. It was interesting to me though that doing the deadlift, I've always put it on a lower body day as if it's kind of very hamstring and glute dominant, and I haven't really necessarily put it in as a back movement, yet that is where I have experienced the majority of kind of the uncomfortableness, I guess. And I don't know if that is because obviously the back's worked a ton with the deadlift, but I don't know if that's because I'd been working my hamstrings and glutes with like good mornings and things beforehand. So it was a very novel stimulus to my back in that way, and not as much of a novel stimulus for like my hamstrings and glutes. I'm not sure, but it was fun. We'll see where it goes.
Cool. Sounds good. I'm excited.
the places I'm worried with, and the places that are probably fatigued that are unwanted, is I very much get fatigued in my upper back. So kind of obviously back rounding is quite easily in that position, and just that is the area. I can remember having back pain consistently in that area when I would deadlift, and it would put me off squatting and other lifts. And then my lower back I know is fatigued in a way that it's not just soreness. There is some kind of unwanted fatigue there as well. And I think that just comes from deadlifting. So it's kind of like, is the cost going to be worth the benefit? We'll see.
But you give it a try, and I think that's the good thing about it. And I mean, this is also the beauty about bodybuilding. We are not dependent on certain exercises, and you can cycle them in, see what comes out or what you get out of them. And if it's simply not worth it, get rid of them once again. But right now it's a novel stimulus, as you already alluded. And that's maybe, it is a little bit more beneficial than just always repeating them and always keeping them in there, even though that it is a heavy compound lift. And we're always talking about having heavy compound lifts as the bread and butter in your program. But yeah, once again, it will show in the future whether it is worth it or not.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to me because there seems to be like a bit of swing and roundabouts in terms of variation, staleness, novelty, like accommodating resistance and adaptive adaptation. And I, like everything, I really think there is that middle ground where you get the best of everything. Because, for example, I know Andy Galpin, who came on not too long ago on the podcast, spoke about how he really thinks variation is powerful, and how to change things up quite drastically now and then is actually a really great way to keep progress going. And I know there are people who are very stubborn, especially with the big three, who just consistently do them. And I know that if I had deadlifts in my program for ages now, I know I wouldn't have got the kind of the stimulus that I've got this time round. And I know we do adapt to things, but we don't want to change things up so often that we can't kind of capitalize on that. So it's very much finding that point at which, when should I make that switch?
Yeah, and in that regard, this is why I really do like true periodization in a macro cycle, of having something like what I actually tend to favor right now is having like 2 to 3 hypertrophy blocks, but followed by a metabolite block, followed by a primer phase, simply due to exercise variation and also introducing new stimuli, because a metabolite block will look different than a normal hypertrophy block. You're doing probably higher repetitions, higher volume in general, but also you aren't really doing that with heavy compound lifts, or not to say something like a barbell deadlift. Maybe you're only doing something like a dumbbell Romanian deadlift or so, right? Which is already an exercise variation there for one mesocycle. And then you're switching over to a primer phase where you're probably sticking with the heavy compound lifts specifically. And then when you're transitioning over to a hypertrophy block, you're maybe finding the middle ground between the metabolite block and the primer phase. And I had this discussion a couple of times already with clients, why I didn't change exercises from a mesocycle to mesocycle. And this is because I have the idea or the long-term progress in mind. And that is like, okay, when we are changing things now, then it would always be another stimulus each and every single mesocycle, but that wouldn't necessarily mean that you get more out of it, because another stimulus will throw you back in regards to the relative intensity you can use with a certain exercise. There's only the misconception or the wrong perception of, holy shit, that feels heavy, and holy shit, yes, I can progress from week to week. But from a relative intensity perspective, you probably, when you are introducing a new exercise, using less weight because it is another stimulus, right? And this is where I like to periodize, because this ensures that you're always kind of working at the limit for each and every single exercise, but also having variation in there from, I don't know, between these mesocycle forms of hypertrophy metabolite prima phase.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm playing with, and something that is a bit of a thought process I've gone through myself, is thinking I do it very similar, kind of those 2 to 3, and then finish in a metabolite mesocycle and go into a primer phase, if we're just massing and we're not talking about mini cuts or anything. And then I'm thinking, okay, that's 4 months or 4 to 5 to 6 months where maybe I've kept a lot of those exercises fairly sticky, maybe changed some isolation movements, maybe in a metabolite phase, some things aren't appropriate, and then making a few additional, like more kind of wholesome changes the next kind of hypertrophy macro cycle, which is kind of what I'm doing this time around, where I've made quite a few changes. And my kind of logic there is, within that macro cycle, each mesocycle, you're maybe finding that your minimum effective volumes are potentially going up a little bit as you're adapting to movement. So they're less and less stimulative. But you're kind of keeping that maintenance volume or minimum effective volume down by introducing higher repetition ranges, down sets, metabolite work. So you can almost get away with the same amount of work. You're not having to do stupid amounts of volume that's just kind of unsustainable. And then by coming out of the primer phase, you've also reset yourself somewhat to training volumes because you brought it right down. But also by changing some movements, you then bring minimum effective volumes also further down. And you're getting the great variation of terms of, like, if you do a different movement, you're going to hit different muscle fibers in different angles in different ways. That's kind of my thought process that I'm going through. And I just think it's not, there's no like black and white, this is the right answer. But I'm going to see how it works for me. I've just liked... I did go through a period of time of changing movements maybe every mesocycle, and that felt like it was too frequent for me. And so I'm kind of like actually maybe doing it at the end of an entire macro cycle. So I progressed with a movement throughout virtually the whole thing, then changing it to something slightly different, see how that goes. So yeah, some other movements I've changed are, obviously I was barbell benching for ages out of my show for months and months and months, went to close grip, and now I'm going back to standard grip barbell, but with a pause. And it's just small changes, and just seeing how that kind of trends along. Because I think a lot of people worry about tracking, but when you think about the movements, they're so similar that you can still track, like a close grip to a normal grip to a pause grip. It's not like they're absolutely miles apart. They're all fairly close in terms of being able to track that and monitor progress. So yeah, I'll just see how it goes. And finding that middle ground, that sweet spot of varying enough, but not so much that you're just kind of fooling yourself.
It's just something I just wanted to bring up here, is that once again, and this is something I'm not excluded of, is that people put too much stock into one single variable of their training once again. And when it comes to exercise selection, too many people put too much emphasis on that, or do think that it makes such a huge difference. And I really don't think that it does. I think that volume and intensity is basically what is the most fundamental thing for actually making progress. And other things, such as, I don't know, the exercise variation, the amounts of exercises, the frequency, all these kind of things play a less important role and are just like means to an end, but are not the fundamental principles. And every once in a while, I'm just wondering whether people are once again missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's a very similar way to kind of, the body doesn't know if you've eaten an apple or you've eaten a pear. It's just getting the vitamins, the minerals, and the macronutrients from those, and they could be almost identical for the body. So the fact is you're stimulating a muscle group. It doesn't know if it's doing a single arm machine row or a single arm dumbbell row. It just is getting stimulated in a certain way. And yes, we're hit just like an apple and pear, slightly different micros. The kind of dumbbell row and the one arm row, machine row are going to hit maybe slightly different muscle fibers, but it's not going to make or break progress. The key is that you're getting the right macros or the right kind of volume and intensity there. So I thought that was a good example. Yeah,
when we take a look at a certain, I'm so bad in actually citing who actually took care of that study, but there was this one study where they took a look at whether you can just get away with doing whatever you want for a specific muscle group, right? So always varying it from from workout to workout. When it comes to single joint movements, there isn't much difference. So you could basically go in there and say, okay, I want to hit today the biceps. Go in, do, I don't know, maybe a barbell curl or maybe do a dumbbell curl or something like that. But it's probably working the muscle group to the same extent. Sure, unless you're not doing something like a bow support squat and compare that to a barbell back squat, then you should be fine, I think.
Yeah, I think that sort of training, I guess that comes down to the whole, what's it called, like intuitive training, or I forget what it was exactly called, but that, I guess it's, I would assume that would work fairly effectively for more advanced trainees. I know there's some like pro bodybuilders who don't logbook, who don't track their progress, and they just go in the gym and they just work hard. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's going to produce the best results. I certainly don't think if I or you train that way, we'd probably see great progress. But for some people, that's all they need when they've got those genetics. They can just go in the gym, work very hard. And I think that is a case of like, if you just do work hard, it can take you quite a far way. And that is it does kind of tick off a lot of boxes that you might otherwise miss if you working hard is like something you have to at least get done. So no, that is interesting. And I think the hardest thing would be tracking and monitoring progress and then making sure you were.
No, absolutely. And it is exactly what you just summed it up what I was trying to say there. It's not that I'm promoting that kind of training, but I also just wanted to highlight that you don't really need to think about it too much and stress yourself about it too much, because it is probably not as important as long as you're hitting the fundamental principles as always.
And then, for me, the deadlift was the biggest, probably like, not shocking change, but the biggest like big change to the program. And then the only other change I'm making, and again, this is an experiment, is I'm splitting up. People will know I'm doing AM and PM workouts, which I stopped doing during the mini cut. I'm reintroducing them and basically just splitting up my leg sessions into AM and PM. So either hamstrings and then quads and then quads and then hamstrings. And I'm going to see how that goes. My worry is something like yesterday's session, which was deadlifts in the AM, is that I would be too shattered to even accomplish. But when you think about it, a deadlift can ruin you for that single session. So by having more time for that evening session, am I going to be more recovered? I don't know. We'll have to see. I was fine yesterday and it was good. I don't know how it will go for the rest of the mesocycle.
So from my personal experience, deadlifts don't shatter me on the same day most of the time, but more so the next day. So I would assume that probably you're more so paying the price like the day after, when you're then deadlifting in the morning. And then in the PM session, you're going in once again and training, I don't know, the quads then, that it would just like accumulate even the fatigue on top of that. But this is just an assumption because, once again, I always felt like the deadlifts on that single day, yes, I was exhausted, but it wasn't really like the effects of the deadlift session I was feeling on that particular day, but more so than the next day. And when you're then adding another lower body movement at the end of the day, once again, when you are a little bit recovered, right, and you can even overload it even more so there as well, that it might add even more fatigue on top of it all. But it's just a thought I had right now. Never thought about it before.
I just think for me, I know deadlifts are very acutely fatiguing. So like in that workout, I am pretty dead after deadlifts, pretty much. So I'm thinking that by doing this, I'll kind of get a bit more recovery before then hitting the quads more. And it should work from a theoretical standpoint in terms of muscle being used. Obviously, quads are better, like I'm doing deadlifts off the floor and then Romanian deadlifts, and then I do some curls and shrugs at the end for that session, so it's basically like hamstring, pull, glute workout. And there's no quad really involved with any of that apart from a little bit of quad on conventional deadlifts, which is why I've basically chosen those over sumo, because they have a little bit more quad and less glute than what a sumo would, which is what I want. And yeah, then finishing off quads in the evening. So yeah, I'll see. But I mean, for the other leg session, I think it'll be absolutely fine with I'm doing some sort of squat and then probably a Smith machine squat and then doing leg curls in the evening. So hamstrings are barely used within a squat movement or kind of a leg press that you've specifically chosen to hit the quads. So yeah, they're really the only wholesale changes I've made. Like I said, I consulted with Mike and he pretty much said don't change too much because things seem to be going pretty well. So
cool.
And apart from that, I was consuming, for those who might be interested, around 2,300 calories on my mini cut, and I've gone up to now, had a few days kind of building up towards maintenance, but I'm now back at 3,500 to 3,600, just to no point hanging around. Hell. Let's get them back in.
Yeah. Oh, fucking hell, eh? Yeah, I'm right now. I mean, I'm doing a diet break, which is kind of I forced upon myself, basically, with discussing it with you as well. But I'm still keeping it a little bit more conservative, only eating around 3,000 to 3,200 calories. And then we are going back into dieting again. And when I just hear about you consuming 3,500 to 3,700, and I'm just thinking about going back into the deficit, it's just like, God damn it. Why am I not an Alberto Nunez who can actually cut on 3,000 calories?
That's the dream.
That is really the dream, eh?
So in terms, I know we spoke off air about this, and like that you almost struggled, and actually I had a small period of this during my mini cut where I struggled to go back to eating more because I was such in the routine. I was like, it's that temptation of things are going pretty well. I don't want to break this up. Why not just continue? But it's better for your longevity to take the break now. I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed it in the past, I think, to death already. Like, you don't want to be forced into taking a break because of physiological or psychological reasons, but you want to take it as a preventive tool. And this is what I did. It was a really busy week for me. I was feeling a little bit of niggling pain once again at the typical area of my back. And this is the week also before I'm moving to Potsdam for my undergrad. So it was just the perfect timing to actually take it now because it was such a stressful and busy week. And the previous week, right, was the first week where I went to university, and it was just like super exhausting. I mean, and I couldn't imagine to do an overreaching week this week around with all the commuting and going back and forth. So I just decided on the go to actually take that now in conjunction with a diet break. The diet break simply because I'm only like 5 to 6 weeks away from my actual time frame or goal I set for myself for this cutting phase. But and I probably could have pushed through it, right? But I was so successful so far with that cutting phase that I told to myself, okay, it is a stressful week. I'm not doing myself any kind of favor with not taking a diet break. So I decided on the go to just take it. And that's what I did. And it's still a little bit hard to actually stick to that because I am so busy right now on a day-to-day basis, and everyone who is really busy knows that you tend to, it's not really forgetting about eating, but you simply maybe don't have the time for it. And when you are on the road, at least that's the case for me, I really don't like to have the feeling of having a full stomach when I'm walking around, when I'm, I don't know, around other people and stuff like that, right? And so it was kind of a struggle for me to actually get my calories in during that diet break. And also because I was so much on the flow. I was, for 7 weeks, no refeed, no cravings, no kind of, I don't know, symptoms of diet fatigue or anything like that, right? And it was going so well. The weight loss was just like going downhill all the time. But then this week came where I went to university, first week of university, and it was just like the weight was stuck. It was crazy. I mean, but it was just showing that the circumstances always dictate what is going on with the scale weight readings as well. And yeah, but once again, I just had struggles with actually increasing the calories and accepting that a diet break is the best way to go about it, even though it wasn't really needed. I thought that, yeah, basically it is probably the best. And the cut was going so successful so far, so why not take it now? Give yourself a little bit of a break, and then when you are in Potsdam and everything is a little bit more settled, you can go for the last 5 to 6 weeks and be successful.
And listening to your kind of description on all of that, if I was coaching you, I'd for sure have programmed a diet break and a deload this week to kind of give you that real boost, so you can really have just a successful end of the dieting phase. And we've both been there before where, yeah, if we've tried to push a deload kind of into a week where we're not sure about it, we're not convinced it's the right thing to be doing, and then potentially things have just not fallen how we wanted them to. I think it's just like I did that quote on Instagram where it's like, no one ever regrets taking a deload. I don't think you can really regret taking a diet break. More often than not, I think they buy you more time than they end up taking away. So yeah, I think doing that is definitely the right call. I think in some circumstances, maybe for more Gen Pop people or more people who are a bit kind of, they don't have such successful fat loss phases, they're a bit slow, then they're basically almost using up less fuel, and so they need diet breaks less often. But you've been right on point the entire time. You've been nailing it. So it's like you need that refuel so you can keep that going for the rest of the time. And that's often the way I approach it with clients. If they're kind of not nailing it, I'm like, well, we're not going to take that diet break because you just simply don't need it. You've almost been taking mini diet breaks on the way. Totally. Whereas for some of them nail it and they don't want to take it. But I'm like, this will benefit you. You don't even know how much.
And I don't know, the reason why I was so hesitant in taking that as well was because I was finally back to the person I knew from the past. All the guys who are listening and following us since a longer time know that I was struggling everything since last October until, I don't know, like May or something this year, with my nutrition and being on point with everything and having my structure and my usual robotic behavior. And I'm not saying that robotic behavior is necessarily a good thing, but for me, it just keeps me sane and keeps me on track and keeps me, I don't know, this is just the way, or the person I know that I am, right? And now I finally got back to the things and groove of things, and I was just like, yes, that is me actually, finally again. Right, and it's just like, I'm trying to come up with an analogy, but there's nothing I can really think of. But it's just like, yeah, really, as if you're going to Bali, right, and try to find yourself there. Actually, I found myself this time around once again with this dieting phase, and it was just like a blessing for me, and I was just so happy to actually that it was working that well, and that I was back to being my usual self. And maybe this was also the reason why I didn't really want to take the diet break, because I was finally, again, the person I used to be. And I'm going back. I don't know whether there was a subconscious fear of maybe going back and binging or anything like that, right? Which was definitely not happening because I had such a huge, or my habits have been built over the past couple of weeks once again, and they strengthened and they're just in place right now. And there's not even the tendency of going out. I still have the box of cereals and small treats from one of my clients, Wendy, shout out to Wendy, and I haven't even touched that yet. Because I was just like, no, I simply don't want it because it makes things so much harder going back into a caloric deficit again when I'm now going into eating highly palatable foods. It makes things so much harder to get them back again because it's still so present in your mind. It's so present for your taste buds. And the fucked up thing is, right, everyone knows that who listened to us like last year. And I had really issues with Lebkuchen because I do love Lebkuchen, especially the chocolate ones. And Katie knows that I do like Lebkuchen. And she wanted to do me a favor and she bought me a 500 gram pack of Lebkuchen, right? The chocolatey ones, because it is Christmas time, right? It's Christmas time. So you can actually get them now. And she just sent me a message saying, I have a surprise for you, waiting for you at home. Got home into the kitchen and I was just like... And I was by myself, right? And I was just like, it's like a drug addict coming to your home, and all of a sudden there lies some heroin with a needle and a spoon and a lighter, right? It's just like smiling in your face, like, come on, take the shot. It's now lying here, and you are by yourself, so take off your clothes and just enjoy the moment, right? But yeah, I was just like, oh shit. Katie came back home, and I said, I know that your intentions are true and you just wanted the best for me, but I need to get rid of that. I can't have it in the household. Or I don't want to have the temptation in the household. I wasn't in a moment where I was actually falling into the risk of eating one of them. Not at all. But when I can say something from my experience, not just for myself, but also working with clients, is having things like these just lying around in your household. It's like a ticking time bomb if you are susceptible to maybe overeating, right? Because the time will come where your willpower is not with you, where your motivation is not with you, where you're overly tired, and then it can happen that you just like, fuck it. What? One doesn't make the difference, right? And then the second one follows, the third one follows. And I just basically said to her, I need to get rid of that. And she now, I don't know, hid it somewhere in the household. And
she consumed them.
Yeah, every once in a while she snacks on them. I'm just like, what are you doing there? Nothing. Right? Like the typical thing. But yeah, I don't know. I totally got off tangent here, but I think there was a message in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because we're such different dieters in that sense. Because I don't know what it is. I have something, and people probably view it as like a good thing, and I don't necessarily think it is, where I cannot switch off, and like I can't even imagine ever binging. I just can't even ever imagine it. It's just a weird foreign concept to me, and it almost to a point frustrates me because I almost want to have the close temptation because I want to help clients with it. That's kind of fucked up that I want to like have this binging behavior almost, but I want to have at least experienced it because I struggle to completely understand it. And that's why I think I'm so grateful to have like yourself on the team and to be able to talk things through with you as well, so that when this does happen with clients, I can sympathize with them more, because I'm sure there's some of the listeners, probably less of them, who will be able to relate to me, where I just cannot, like, if I'm programmed myself to have one Leberkuchen enters my mouth, if I have any more, then I drop other food and I will go to bed like starving, ravenously hungry. And I don't say that as like necessarily a positive thing, because in some instances it certainly is, like contest prep, that can be really great. But I think it can get me in trouble sometimes, where maybe I consume things like a Leberkuchen when I'm in a period of time when that's not the best source of nutrition, and I just have it and then suffer the consequences of low energy and poor performance or something at times. And also I find it very difficult to switch off. So during like a Christmas time period, sure, I'll eat them, but it will be programmed. Steve will eat these, and they make sense within an overall structured plan. I just cannot somehow get out of that sensation of just being able to just chill. And it's not necessarily a sensation of, I need to overeat to experience that. It's just like, I just can't even not know that I haven't overeaten. I guess it's close to a slight like eating disorder type of behavior that I've had for years. And I don't think I have an eating disorder, but I definitely don't think I'm normal in that regard.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because right now I don't think that I would be in a position to actually be at the risk of overeating or binging. First and foremost, I think that when you have other people around you, it becomes highly unlikely that you're going to binge your face off or overeat. And thus, because Hugo's around and Katie's around, I don't think that this will happen because, I mean, you are not feeling great already when you are by yourself and you're overeating. You're just like, everyone who experienced that is like, yeah, after binging, it's just like you regret what you've just did. You feel awful. Like, really, you feel awful, right? Because you're so stuffed with food. And having other people around highly reduces the likelihood that this becomes actually true, or that you are just stuffing the face, because then it's not just the feeling afterwards that it feels awful, but also in the moment itself, because other people will just look like, what the fuck is going on with you, right? And the fucked up thing, though, is when you turn it around and look at competitors post-show, it seems like it's accepted from other people around them. Like, yeah, you starved yourself for a couple of months.
They want you to.
Yeah, come on, eat now, eat now. I can totally see why you are behaving that way, right? And then it's accepted. But especially in that situation, it can do long-term harm. Yeah. Not just for in that situation, for the physiology in it for itself, but also from a psychological perspective.
It'll become habit.
And this is something where it's just like, you have to be careful, especially when people around you are supporting that behavior.
I think there was a recent study that actually came out and looked into that, and how like crazy amounts of body weight some people can put on in such a short period of time. It is scary because it's not only detrimental from a physique progress standpoint, because you put on all the fat, if not more sometimes, than what you kind of started your contest prep at. But the ramifications of kind of you're raising your body weight by that extent in such a short period of time, that's not healthy for kind of your physiological systems that are dealing with that rapid weight gain. That's not healthy. Just like losing weight incredibly fast is not a healthy thing for you either. But
wasn't there last? Oh, sorry if I interrupted there. Wasn't there last week just? I don't know if that was. No, I don't think it was a study. It was just like an article of a competitor who needed to go into the hospital because of totally forgot what it's called, pneumonia or something like that. Like his body just like
shut down.
Because he was in such a overfed kind of state for his entire system and body that he needed to go to the hospital. I haven't read through it, so don't quote me on that one. It's just something like many people posted, and I saw that. I wanted to actually read it, but didn't really find the time for it. Are you talking, or are you referring to that? Or?
I think there was actually a study. It might be an article as well. But I think there was a study on it. I haven't actually read into it. I just know it was talking about the post-show period and how bad, like how you can really royally screw yourself up, because a lot of competitors will do that. And the trouble is not necessarily gaining that body fat, is then they're not in a position really where they want to continue a gaining phase, because now they're at like 18-20% body fat potentially. They can't even diet down because they haven't given themselves, they might be at a healthy body fat percentage and they might be in a good caloric intake, but the physiological systems they have a time course of recovery as well, which is to be expected. And then, so that they're not even in a kind of a healthy position to be able to do a mini cut or something. And some people will try to, and they may well succeed, but they're just worsening their psychological state. And the thing you brought up about it becomes the norm to binge after shows. Every single time that person does a diet or does a show, they have that binge afterwards, and it almost be like the binge eating behavior where people purge, then they binge, they purge and binge. And that's in some ways what bodybuilding is controlled purging and binging, but you don't want it to become the uncontrolled purging and binging, because that's a dangerous state to get into. And that's not going to be a good bodybuilder. That's a terrible bodybuilder.
And that happened basically to me. And I don't know if you do remember when we've been talking off air about on WhatsApp back and forth, right? And I was just pretty often it happened that I was sitting at home. It was late. I was, watching football. It happened so often when I watched NFL, especially Sunday NFL, that I was just lying there in bed, and then, I can have a snack, right? And then it just turned into, a mess. I wouldn't call it a binge, because a binge is just like
uncontrolled.
Yeah, super uncontrolled. But it was just like you justified it, right? So depending on how you would define a binge, because I think that there are probably people out there where it's so much more severe than what I've experienced. I had some times where I just like massively overate on protein bars, for example, where it ended up being proper a couple of thousand calories above my maintenance. So this was a binge, but that happened not so often as with, you were over like 500 calories or something like that, right? But it sums up, if that happens on a frequent basis, like 2-3 times per week, whoops, you're in an additional surplus of 1,500. And I was already in a surplus, right? And it became the habit and the norm, because every single time I was sitting at home watching NFL, there was the NFL, or watching something, watching a movie, watching a TV show or something, was the trigger for that, right? Sitting in bed, watching something. That was always the trigger. But because it was such a common thing, because it is something so many people do on a consistent basis, this kind of behavior, right? When you are combining this with something like binging, it has such a positive impact on your brain. Like, okay, every single time you are enjoying this, you also want to enjoy that, right? It becomes like really that true habit. And I would even say that it's kind of dangerous, because when you don't control it over time, it could make you really obese, actually. And that can have possible health consequences in general. And thus, it's really a kind of a dangerous behavior. And if you don't watch out, that it can actually end in a downward spiral for you and your overall health.
It's actually incredibly interesting, because I guess it all but it reminds me of the Pavlov dogs, where the bell would ring and then the dog would get food. And then there became a point where you ring the bell and the dog would already be salivating because he expected food. So that it's like an automatic response almost. And you see this with people, they go to the cinema. Cinema means a large popcorn and potentially some, pick a mix, which is awesome. And I can appreciate that. But that means you can't go to the cinema and enjoy it without having these things, you're going to find it really hard when it comes time to diet and you want to do something like go to the cinema.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I had these discussions so often with clients where it's just like, I will go out to the cinema, or I'm always having a glass of wine with my fiance or something, and I need that, right? Which is like, do you really need that? Is it that important for the moment? Or is it just this situation where you would like that, right? And I mean, yes, it is like you said. I do enjoy having popcorn in cinema as well, but it's not mandatory that the movie or the occasion is good. But so many people make it out to be that way simply because it's first and foremost just a behavior that is now there and ingrained, and also it is simply a part of maybe even their environment and society, where it's just like, you have to do that. You can't watch a movie without popcorn. What is wrong with you, right? And also here, it becomes like, or it's more so the question about what is really important for you. Are your goals, overall goals, more important for you? Or is it the situation where you are going into the cinema and have a bag of popcorn? And if that's really more important for you, then you have to make trade-offs somewhere else, because we've been talking about trade-offs offline, and that is everything in life basically comes with a trade-off. You can't possibly do everything at once, simply because time is limited. And because time is limited, we have to prioritize what is important and what means more to us in that single situation.
And I think it's just important to be aware of these behaviors that potentially you're developing and not even realizing. I know I've had it before where I can't remember what sort of situations it's been at, but maybe even like when I was younger, I'd go around friends' houses and we'd have dinner, and then afterwards I'd always have dessert at home. So I'd be expecting a dessert, and dessert for me was like, I don't know, something chocolate or something like calorie dense like that. And they'd bring out like fruit and yogurt, and I'd be like, this isn't dessert. What is this about? And it's so strange. And I think even from a young age, some people, their parents might give them dessert after every meal. They might be used to having a snack before bed. Maybe it's like a biscuit before bed every night, a cookie in the morning, like with their cereal. Like, these things can be weird habits that you just grow up with and keep going. And I think it's the same with like coffee. I find it the same with like chewing gum, with like Pepsi Max or any kind of diet sodas. If I end up like making it a habit, every single dinner I have a Pepsi Max, it's so hard not to then not have one. And I mean, that's not a bad one, to be fair. Like, you could have much worse habits than that. But it's like the wine. A lot of like, I've worked with Gen Pop clients before where they have wine and they have half a bottle of wine every night. And it's like, that's like, we can keep that in, but think about everything you have to knock out to keep that in. Can you reduce that? Can you substitute it? It's a scary thing.
That's why I think that the saying, the power of habits, is so true.
Yeah.
And I think that is something we've talked about in the past as well a couple of times, that you don't want to rely on motivation. You don't want to rely on willpower. Or, I don't know, your support group or something. You want to actually build some habits so that when willpower isn't there, when the motivation isn't there, when the environmental support isn't there, that you can at least rely on just your habits. Because there comes a time where you won't think about executing anymore. It's just became a part of you, that you're just doing it without questioning it. And it can actually be the other way around as well, because, I mean, we've talked about situations where habit can actually turn out to be a little bit negative for your overall outcome, for your overall progress and goals. And of course, it holds true there as well, that when you don't take care of it or are a little bit cautious, then the negative habits can build as well. And just to give the people an example, everyone knows about one or two people in their environment who smoke only when they are at a bar or at an event or something like that. They're not smoking, and when you ask them why they are smoking, it's just like, I don't know, it's the occasion, it's the event. Usually I never smoke, right? But it's just like it became a habit. Every single time you are at the party or at a party, you are going to smoke, right? No matter whether you like it or whether you are a smoker or a non-smoker, but you are going to do that, right? When you're not really thinking about it, that can actually always be around you without you actually wanting to do that, right? And that's why I just think that the power of habits has to be, I don't know, controlled by you, and they shouldn't really dictate you, even though if the habits you've built are good ones or bad ones, right? Always be in control over everything you're doing. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say there.
Yeah, I absolutely do know people that do that exact thing, and it frustrates the hell out of me. I'm that person that's always looking at people like, I try not to now. I don't look at people in that way where I'm like, oh, you really shouldn't be smoking. You should know better, because they do know better. They do know they shouldn't be smoking, especially people around our age. The consequences are well and truly known. And I think really what we've summed up there is just like how easily habits can make you or break you in many ways. Because I know a lot of our listeners and ourselves will have brilliant habits inbuilt, and you've built your habits now to a point where they are making your fat loss successful, whereas you had habits previously that you'd built in which were sabotaging any fat loss success. So it's just making sure that you're building the appropriate ones and identifying the ones that may be sabotaging you and manipulating them in a way that they can help you, or not, at least not hinder you in such a way. And sometimes it just takes a while to sit down and really have a think about things, and that's all it takes.
Absolutely. I just want to add something there, because when I built the negative habit of just overeating, right, I justified my behavior for myself. I always said, like, in this situation, yeah, it's absolutely fine, right? I looked up things like de novo lipogenesis when I'm overeating carbs, right? I won't get I won't store as much fat in that situation, right? That's why I keep rather the fats out there. So it's absolutely fine, right? I justify my own behavior, but it's basically no different to the people who are drinking, who get massively drunk, and I don't know, who get aggressive in that situation. Like the next day, like, hey, I'm totally sorry about my behavior. I must have blacked out. Totally sorry, but the alcohol was actually the true cause for my behavior, but not really my habits that led to actually me being drunk, right? And in that situation, what helped me was just support from others, and also accepting that it kind of became a problem overall. Right, because yes, it was a negative behavior and it was a negative habit, and just realizing that and not justifying that, but more so accepting that was so helpful. So accepting that, and also support from your friends and family, and especially now, yeah, Katie helped me massively with that. Ever since we are together, it's just like not even up for debate. I'm actually once again back to my old self because of that.
It's excellent to hear, and yeah, I mean, I can only agree. I think that's a good message for the listeners, and there may be some people who have some of those bad habits kind of ingrained, and it is a case of they are hard to shift, but they can be manipulated, and it's just giving yourself time. And like you said, the first thing to do is identify it and then get support with it, and that can really work wonders. I don't know if we've got much else to add. We've come to 52 minutes, and I know we've got loads of people saying last time that actually they enjoy it when it's really long. But we don't have actually any questions to answer, so we've done really well to even get this far when we had no topics. We've just somehow spoken and rambled about habits and deadlifts.
This is episode 77, and if the people have been listening to all of the episodes, they should know by now that we can actually make up and come up with just talking for an hour without having any kind of topic before that. So, yeah.
And next time I will try and remember I think we get a really good response on Instagram actually when we request questions. I don't know if people have an idea of a better way of, I'd almost thought whether we could have like a form on the website where people can submit questions and then we can go through them there and just have like a whole bucket full. My only worry is that we'd have just so many questions come in that we'd just be inundated.
Asking. So, for all of our clients, right, I just want to complain now. So I just asked a question in our Team Revive group about uncommon exercises, right? And then, of course, there are people who are just taking the piss out of the situation, or just posting like exercises that are definitely not uncommon. It's just like, goddamn people, mate. But I should actually. I shouldn't be the one complaining, because I really do like to take the piss out of people online. When there's just something that is being asked, I like to throw in some kind of troll comment. So that is absolutely fine.
You've just invited trolling because we actually normally don't get trolling questions. They're normally pretty good.
Except for David trolling.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, his name implies it already.
Yeah, he doesn't.
And
often...
he's from Ireland.
It's just accepted. Trolls. It's their culture.
Yeah.
So guys, we'll leave it there. It's been good talking to you as always. If you have any kind of struggles with habits or anything you wanted to kind of discuss, feel free to chuck it in the comments, or even better, join us over in our Facebook group and have a bit of a discussion in there, because there's just a huge like-minded community and it'll be great to have you in there. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you soon.
Cheers.